I think the uncertainty, the chaos that has happened since last evening when we heard about this has caused a lot of grave concern on the part of older adults who rely on Meals on Wheels as a lifeline.
Chaos and confusion unleashed. Earlier this week, the White House Budget Office ordering a pause on federal aid. The move could have potentially impacted trillions of dollars in government spending, including for some public programs that affect millions of Americans. Now, part of that plan temporarily blocked by a federal judge, but not before sparking intense backlash by Democrats.
This decision is lawless, it's destructive, it's dangerous, it's cruel, it's illegal, and it's unconstitutional. Donald Trump has done a lot of bad things in the last week, but nothing's worse than this.
Despite the short-lived confusion over the order, Republicans supported the move.
I think it's appropriate to take a look at it and make sure there isn't some nefarious actions.
We think that some of the areas that could be restricted, if they are items that the executive branch has the authority to issue or to look at.
He's not halting, he's reviewing it, and in a certain amount of time he's going to release it again. That's what he ran on.
So, Matt, I'll start with you. Republicans, they're broadly supportive in general of clawing back government funding. But when some of these cuts hit on the ground in red states, Meals on Wheels, Head Start, Medicaid, what do you think the response will be?
I think in many ways what we're seeing from Trump, especially as the transition started, is a reversion to businessman Trump in a way. I think this is actually in many ways the first start of a negotiation. And I think that is how to look at this a little bit. And look, I think one of the things that this thing was very broad, and they need to be very clear to not just kind of let a vacuum form where Democrats are defining what's not happening. And they seem to be a little bit caught off guard by this, how Democrats are defining what's in this and what's not. So they need to be a little bit more proactive as they go and define exactly what this means and what it doesn't mean too. But I think in some ways this is more of a negotiating tactic to get things on the table.
Sabrina, do you think this was a strategy to just throw everything against the wall and then see what they come back with the understanding that some of these things are going to be challenged in court?
A little bit of that, absolutely, yes. I mean, we saw that Trump talked about this again. This is something that on the campaign trail he said, we know that the U.S. Constitution gives Congress the power to appropriate funds. The money, gets allocated by Congress. Trump is disputing that. Trump is arguing that he should have power, that his agenda, if it doesn't align with what his vision is of the United States' future, if it doesn't align with his agenda, that this is something that he should be able to do, that he should be able to cut funds and decide where money goes and where it doesn't go. I think the miscalculation that the Trump administration made here was just the outrage, the chaos, the confusion that was going to happen. I think yesterday was defined for a lot of us as seeing on social media misinformation of what's on it, what's not, and it's because this was a 2-page memo that did not articulate extremely clearly what was included and what was not. And I think some of that chaos and confusion could be intentional, could not, but is the way that is landing for a lot of people.
And against a fire hose of administrative actions, perhaps they thought that it would go under the radar. But Stephen Collinson, you wrote a little bit about Trump's authority here. I mean, in your piece today for CNN.com that he's a bombastic disruptor, that he was elected with what he sees as a broad mandate here. But you said it also reflects Trump's view that the presidency has almost unlimited power and he can simply decide what is legal and what isn't.
Yeah, it was interesting. Some of the administration officials that talked about this yesterday were saying, well, this law, he has the authority to do this, so he's going to do it. We've decided he has the authority. On the issue of firing those prosecutors, the argument was, well, this law is unconstitutional. The president has a mandate to change. A lot of his voters are disenchanted with government. He's trying to bend government to his will. The problem is if every president comes in and starts declaring unilaterally laws unconstitutional and saying that they're not going to honor what the Congress has passed, you don't really have a democratic system anymore. Every law that's passed in the history of the Republic is presumably under threat because a strong-armed president wants to do exactly what he wants. That's the issue here, and what it's going to do, we're going to have 3 or 4 in 1 week cases that are probably going to end up before the Supreme Court, and they're going to start defining what presidential power looks like in the 21st century.
The judge who paused this funding freeze, at least until Monday, said that she doesn't believe that the administration actually knew which programs they were going to cut. Megan, some of the irony here is that the details and the plumbing of a program like this would be run by the Office of Management and Budget, which the administration is largely trying to gut.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it was made clear they didn't know it was in that when they put out 3 different letters from OMB trying to clarify, because the narrative kept getting away from them. I will give Democrats a lot of credit. It showed that we had a pulse for once. We were fighting back, and it only took a week to try to get some more movement. And you got these groups together, and there was an organization that filed the lawsuit, and we got a stay before it went into effect, which I give the Democrats a lot of credit for organizing and doing something to show. I don't think you can negotiate with people's lives, and I don't think that's what they were trying to do, but that ultimately what was happening here. And I do commend Democrats for finally standing up and being like, no, we are going to do something here.
Joining me now is Democratic Representative Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. He's the ranking member of the House Budget Committee and also sits on the House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman, thank you for joining us. I want to start first anecdotally about your district and what you're hearing from organizations there about the impact that this has had so far.
Well, great to be with you. I'm right here in my home in Philadelphia. I represent about half of the city. It comprises my congressional district. It is a largely working class district of people who go to work every day, and a lot of them live paycheck to paycheck, paycheck by paycheck. So when we're talking about all of a sudden Head Start being frozen and Head Start facilities not able to access the portal yesterday, we're suddenly Medicaid frozen. Medicaid is what pays for the majority of people who have an elderly parent or grandparent in nursing homes. So those are just 2 of the many, many examples where government funding interacts with the normal daily lives of many of my constituents. So I heard outrage yesterday. And by the way, so did the Trump administration, because by late yesterday, they were backtracking on a number of things they had said just the night before.
And now a federal judge has paused this program, at least until Monday. And I'm wondering if in those intervening days, if you think that you can either get enough opposition from your Republican colleagues to kill this proposal, or if you can get enough clarification from the White House to limit the impact to some of those organizations you just listed.
I have to say I was not surprised. As extraordinary as it is, and contrary to what Senator Thune said, this is unprecedented and extraordinary. This is not what an incoming administration ever does, because it is completely contrary to the Constitution and to federal law. But as remarkable as a step as it may be, I was not surprised, because Russ Vought, the incoming OMB director, he was one of the principal authors of Trump's Project 2025. And in that document, he wrote in great detail that this is what they would be planning to do. So I think this is going to be litigated in the courts. The Supreme Court previously has upheld unanimously the right of Congress to control the purse. It is pretty clear in Article 1 of the Constitution that Congress has the power of the purse. So I think we will ultimately prevail. But until that is finally resolved in the courts, I think you're going to cause a lot of disruption and a lot of heartache needlessly among the American people.
Finally, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller said yesterday that perhaps the political affiliation of some of these agencies resulted in the funding being cut. I want to play that sound for you and get your response.
Overwhelmingly, the career federal service in this country is far left wing. The American people.
I don't know that to be a fact.
Well, I'll give you a great example. We looked at USAID as an example.
That's
98% of the workforce either donated to Kamala Harris or another left-wing candidate, just as an example.
A Trump official later told CNN that he was referencing outside studies and analysis on the political affiliation. But that as an element here, what does that say to you?
Well, first, I really doubt that organizations like Meals on Wheels and others really have any sort of a political bent one way or the other. That's number one. Number two, Stephen Miller is an individual who just makes things up in order to justify his hateful agenda. 98% of no organization has made a campaign contribution. Actually, very few Americans make campaign contributions. I think they total under 1% of the population. So the reality is, we're dealing with an extreme ideology that is going to be pushing through many extreme things that the American people didn't vote for. They voted for change simply because they didn't like how high costs had gone up in the post-pandemic era. They're not getting costs coming down. Instead, they're getting all of this nonsense and craziness that they didn't vote for. And my concern is every indication is that it will continue under the Trump administration.